Welcome to Action Research Final Project by Kevin Furtick. Action research can be conducted at any time and by anyone who is involved in the topic they are researching. As a teacher, we must always be willing to learn. In a quote from the Gallup Research Group, one teacher states, "When something doesn't work, you just go back and try something else. That's why you have to be a learner." Before starting an action research project, you must first determine your topic. Literature provides some starting points that typically drive us as action researchers. These starting points include things we observe or that we have experienced in our classroom or with our students, mission statements or decisions of our administration. For example, a simple mission statement might be we provide the best education to our students. However, our administration believes that curriculum is designed so that anyone can teach it. Like a teacher with a history degree should be able to teach English just as well as a teacher with an English degree. Development or in-service activities. Participating in development or in-service programs can open up areas for further exploration. Curiosity or theoretical interest. Through observations of fellow teachers, readings online, or just our experiences, we can begin to focus our thoughts on areas we want to learn more about and possibly explore within our teaching. Once we determine our topic, we must begin to narrow our focus so that we can make our research more manageable. Action research should not be a lengthy process, as typically action researchers are looking for ways to change something that they have identified or recognized in their classroom or in their students and need to look for ways to change it in order to make the learning process better. Literature gives some warm-up activities to aid with narrowing our focus. One of the activities that we can conduct in order to help us narrow our focus is an in-depth reflection. Through reflection, we can begin to identify things that have an effect, or a source, or a byproduct of the topic. By grouping or clustering topical areas, we begin to identify things that we have control of or that we can change. In my case, I began to identify sources of my topic, which led to instructor qualifications. What makes an instructor qualified to teach a subject? What part of this is under my control? Using these questions, I made a list of topical areas. To be an instructor, there is a required level of education that must be completed. You must also have excellent communication skills. You must complete the qualification process for the subject you are teaching. You must also complete a minimum number of hours in curriculum design through the development of lesson plans, student guides, and tools for assessing a student's knowledge and skills. Once I had these clusters of information, I was able to conduct an individual brainstorming session where I listed the processes which related to each of these topical areas. Instructors must have received high marks on their last 5 performance reports, indicating they have a high standards and work ethic. They must also complete an in-residence instructor course where they develop presentation skills and classroom management techniques. Finally, they must complete an instructor certification program which documents their formal teaching abilities and overall delivery skills. Upon completing my brainstorming session, I was able to identify which of these areas I had the most control over or ability to affect. The result was the completion of the instructor certification process. This led me to conducting a graphical reconstruction of that qualification process. To finally narrow my topic, I utilized a graphical reconstruction of the certification process by identifying the steps involved. The first step involves the actual qualification, where the new instructor sits in the classroom with a certified instructor and watches and learns how to properly deliver the lesson to the students. The new instructor then takes and must score a certain level on the assessment so that they can demonstrate their level of knowledge about the subject and also understand what is expected of the student. The new instructor will also receive an instructor evaluation by a seasoned instructor, which will identify the new instructor's ability to satisfactorily deliver the lesson. Finally, the new instructor will develop their own lesson plan, student guide, and assessment tools to aid in their delivery and make the lesson more in line with their teaching skills. These course materials will be evaluated by curriculum designers prior to initial delivery. Discussing this process with a coworker, I wanted to look at how we identified what subjects a new instructor would teach and see if there was any consideration to their individual experience of a given subject. The result was that we didn't consider this at all. Then we wanted to look at how well students scored and tried to correlate this with the level of experience instructors had on the subject. This led me to my topic of, does placing instructors in subjects they have the most experience increase the level of understanding of the students? Once I had my topic, it was time to identify the sources of data that I had or that I could use to aid in my research. I realized that my data analysis would consist of both quantitative and qualitative data. Quantitative data would provide statistical evidence related to my topic, while qualitative data would provide me with information that would support or disapprove my hypothesis. Using quantitative data, I can conduct statistical analysis of the relationship to the number of years an instructor had on a given subject to that of the score students achieved on the assessments. The tools I had to collect this data were instructor performance reports and test analysis documents. The second part of my data collection was of qualitative nature. I used instructor evaluations to identify instructors who were able to expand on curriculum topics, who were not able to explain topics outside of what was in the lesson. I also had control over the types of questions that were asked to the students upon completing the lesson, and I was able to develop questions that would provide me with the knowledge the student felt the instructor had on a given subject. Both Ekstrom and Cresswell provide some tools that serve as good data collection points. I used instructor evaluations and student feedback to gauge how well the instructors were able to expand on certain topics. I also used test analysis data to develop a baseline of how well students performed upon being instructed by each individual instructor. Through interviews, I was able to collect the number of years an instructor had on a given topic. As I began to collect my data, it was important for me to create bins so that I could stage my data into areas that were easily manageable. Segor informs us that when developing bins, we would create them so that we collect the most significant data that targets our topic. The bins I used were the number of years of experience an instructor had about the subject, the overall rating they received from the student feedback, the overall rating they received from instructor evaluation related to their use of real-world examples and personal experience outside of the lesson materials, and finally the test scores from the students' assessments. Bins are further broken down into subcategories. For years of experience, I selected a range of 2 years of up to 6 years or more. In the student surveys or feedback forms, students are provided a rating of 1 through 5, with 1 being that the instructor demonstrated little to no knowledge about the subject, and 5 being that the instructor was able to add to the lesson and the overall learning experience. Using a similar question, instructor evaluations would state if the instructor in fact was able to pull from personal experience and provide real-world examples outside of what was in the lesson, or if the instructor could not. Finally, the test analysis would indicate the average score of the class and could even be further broken down into the number of students in a given class that resulted in various scores. By placing my bins in a spreadsheet, I have the ability to manipulate and sort the data for easier analysis. This allows me to identify and triangulate any links or correlation between categories. I can basically begin to establish my relationships that are visible. For an example, an instructor with 0 to 2 years of experience receives a 1 or 2 rating on their student evaluation, then this is a relationship that might support my topic. If an instructor with 0 to 2 years experience receives higher ratings from students, then it could aid in disproving my topic. Conducting action research is not about proving you are right, but about looking for changes that will make learning better for both teachers and students. Once I have analyzed my data and come to some conclusions, I would want to make my data public. Making my data public helps other teachers or action researchers by providing them with a source of information that could help them in their own research. There are many tools that aid in making my data public, and here are just a few. First is documenting my research. I would formally develop a written product based on my notes from the journal I used, which identified the various steps I took to complete my research project. Documenting my process not only helps me by providing me with a tool to reflect upon, but also provides other teacher researchers with an outline that they can use to aid them in their own work. To document a project, writing it down isn't the only way to capture it. With technology today, a video or audio documentation, such as podcasts, allows the action researcher to formally document their action research, its processes, and results. Another way to make my data public is through teacher blogs. Because my research deals with education, it is important to share what I have learned with other educators. As teachers are continuing to learn and develop our individual skills, then there is no better way than learning from our fellow educators. Finally, I would utilize teacher workshops or education boards to present my research and results. Depending on what your research covers, you can identify an audience who would most likely benefit from what you have learned. My research involves the process of whether or not knowledgeable teachers are needed in the classroom. The audience I would be seeking are the administrator or managers of teachers and who have control of the hiring and placement of teachers in the classroom. To add to the credibility of my research, I would want to look for experts in the field who might have also researched the same topic. What I learned was that I was not the only one who had the same question. The No Child Left Behind Act of 2001 states that all teachers will be highly qualified by 2005 to 2006. But what does highly qualified mean? It means teachers will hold degrees and maintain training requirements that meet state certification standards. However, it does not mean that a teacher with a degree in history cannot teach math or science. In a study conducted by the Gallup Research Group, Gordon identifies three important categories that a highly effective teacher must possess: subject matter knowledge, refined teaching skills, and talent. The one that stood out to me the most was subject matter knowledge. In order for a teacher to be able to ensure learning is occurring, they must know the subject well enough to be able to clarify it to any audience they are teaching and be able to assess that knowledge. In addition, one can have subject knowledge, but that does not mean they can teach it or deliver it in a way that someone else might learn from it. This adds to the refined teaching skills and talent a highly effective teacher must possess. Helen Ladd from Duke University conducted research which resulted in identifying that back in the late 1980s, only 17% of teachers had fewer than 5 years experience. However, by 2008, this number had increased to 28%. Her research resulted in the fact that experienced teachers, on average, can be more effective when it comes to student achievement than teachers with less experience. Overall, I found many sources from field experts that support that a teacher's knowledge has a direct impact on a student's achievement. However, one interesting point was discovered from an Italian university study by Maria De Paulo, who determined that a lack of teacher knowledge on a given subject did not sway a student's desire to study that subject. As students develop a passion for a given subject, it is nice to know they are not easily persuaded to give up that passion. Today I have discussed my action research final project. I believe that through utilizing the steps and processes for action research discussed by Altricher and Segor, I will be able to make the learning for my students more enjoyable. Thank you for listening.